say hi.
Hello.
Alright, can I have the mic, please? Alright. So, that was all because I heard a very young little girl say that she was not shy at all and would like to come and say hi to everyone. I thought it would be a chance to actually show that we as a church, we still hold children in such high regard here because they are the future of our church. So thank you for that, Maeve. Alright, now as I go into my message for the day, honestly, my message changed so many times while working through this series that I was planning on doing. When I first became a Christian, I turned to a station on the radio and I heard a character study of David. And I thought because that resounded so much with me, that maybe I should try sharing something very similar with the rest of the congregation. But as I started reading through the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel to start developing this character study, I noticed something very different that really did start resonating with me. And God really started changing the message that I wanted to bring to you today. Today, that is the second. On many occasions, Pastor Mike, when he was here, brought forth messages of the importance and the significance of the second sons, the second Adam, the people who are considered to be lesser than but end up growing to be more than. And through that, that's where I came up with this study for today. Now, I do not have a clicker to move this forward, so I am going to need some help back there, Owen. So if you can move to the next slide, please. All right, and the next one. We learned about Isaac and Ishmael. Isaac being the promised son of Abraham, but also being the second son, so the one that shouldn't have been the legitimate son, the one that shouldn't have been the one who actually went on to do things, but he was the promised son of God. The next one, Esau and Jacob. Esau was the older brother. He was the one who was supposed to have the inheritance. And Jacob, his younger brother, kind of tricked him out of that, but Jacob eventually became Israel. And he became the father of Israel. So again, the second son being the important one that needed to be focused on. Alright, the next one, the prodigal son. The prodigal son was the younger son. He had an older brother who was perfect in almost every way, and he couldn't stand that, so he left. But in that story, as you guys remember, who was the one who ended up receiving the father's blessing? Who is the one who ended up getting the forgiveness of the father and was celebrated by the father? It was the younger one, the prodigal son. And Pastor Mike went into the second Adam when he was still here, about how Adam, the first creation, the first man that God had made, technically a first son, if you will, was the one who brought about the fall of man, or at least had a large part of it. While the second Adam, Jesus, was the one who came about bringing the salvation of mankind. So as I was reading through the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, I came across this theme of the second son again in the story of two priests and the story of two kings. So as we go through this, let's see where I am now. Next slide, please. We're going to start off with 1 Samuel, which really begins the story of two priests. Alright, next one. It begins by focusing on a family. We have a family here with a husband, and a very brave husband at that, because he had two wives. Alright, one wife that he had, she bore him several children. But the wife that he loved was a wife named Hannah, who was barren. She had no children. But with that, she was dearly loved by her husband. Now, next one, please. There was a lot of jealousy and bullying going on with that. Now, this is something that I want to point out to show that bullying has been around since cavemen were bullying cavemen. Alright? Hannah was tormented by her rival. Now, I underlined rival up there because it really made me start thinking about my own life. How many of you have ever had a rival? I know I had one. All through high school, we were friends, but I couldn't think of anything more satisfying than trying to beat this man. His name was Mike. I can't go into his last name in case some people want to go and congratulate him for beating me. Alright, but no matter what I tried, I was in some way jealous of Mike because he was better at me than almost everything. No matter how much I lifted weights, he was always stronger. No matter how much I ran, no matter how much I sprinted, he was always faster. And no matter how much I practiced day and night, he always beat me when we wrestled. It was something that I saw as a rival, something I wanted to beat. Even though that we were friends, it was just something that ate at me. Now, I just wanted to iterate what a rival can be. But even when you look at a rival, someone that you see as being better than you in some way or another that you just want to try to surpass, many times they see the same thing in you, that there is something there that they want to surpass. Hannah looked at her rival wife as a person that she wanted to meet or surpass because she had children, which was a huge honor for a woman in that culture, is to bear children, to bear sons. But in the same way, her rival wife looked at Hannah with a certain amount of jealousy also. Because when Hannah was given things, she was given a double portion. Because the husband loved Hannah. So she was jealous of the love that Hannah was being given, while Hannah was jealous of her because she was given children. And that wife was merciless towards Hannah. She was constantly picking on her and belittling her because I have children. Why have you not given our husband children? This tormented Hannah to the point of tears. Have any of you ever been bullied to the point where you just felt like crying? I'm sure there are many people out there who have. No. Hannah, however, had the correct response. Where I may have just punched the man in the face that was bullying me. Not the right response, by the way. I have grown up, I have learned. Hannah went to prayer. And do you know what she prayed? She prayed, God, please give me a son. If you would only give me a son, I would dedicate that son to you for the rest of his days. And she was praying hard. She was praying so hard and wanted this so badly that the text says, if I can bring up the next one. Oh, wait, you already have it up there. The text says that as she was praying, the head priest Eli thought she was drunk because she was weeping so hard she couldn't even form sentences. Next, please. So she was an ugly crier, but she was a beautiful prayer. Wasn't exactly sure if that was even the right word, prayer, because prayer and prayer, whatever, you understand what I'm trying to get out of that. But you can just kind of imagine that, can't you? This woman falling to her knees and whining and whimpering and weeping. She has snot running down her face and she's trying to form these words and she's so much so that the people around her thought she was drunk because she was praying with such passion. And I really had to think, when was the last time that I prayed with so much passion that people around me thought that I wouldn't be in the right mind? That I cared about something so much that when I prayed for it, I was crying and I was weeping and just snot and tears running down my face. This woman knew how to pray. And because of that, if you look up there in verses 17 and 18, The head priest Eli answered, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked." And then she said in response, "May your servant find favor in your eyes." And then she went away, she ate something, and her face was no longer downcast. Not only did she know how to pray, she knew how to respond to her prayers. She knew that if she wanted her prayers to be answered, she had to believe fully in who she was praying to. Believe fully that it is in the hands of God now. There's nothing else that I can do about it. It's up to Him. And she was able to get on with her life. She was able to no longer be depressed. She was able to no longer be sad and no longer allow the prodding of her rival to bother her. And as she went home, she did end up conceiving and bearing a son named Samuel. All right, next slide, please. And there it is. She gave birth to a boy. Now, as it continues on, it says that she kept the boy until he was weaned. In that culture, it meant that she had the boy until he was between the ages of 3 and 5 years old before she went to the temple to dedicate her son to that temple, which means that her son would then be brought up by the temple and the priests. Now, those of you who are mothers, can you imagine having your son sitting in your hand, bouncing on your knees, smiles and curls, and just, "Mommy!" And then around the age of 3, to hand him over to the church to be raised by the priests. This woman had faith. She also had a sense of integrity. And sense of integrity that is very sorely missing in a lot of people that I see today. But she believed in God so much, and she loved God so much that she couldn't stand the thought of breaking a promise to Him. That even when she loved her son as much as she did, she still dedicated her son to the church, allowing her son to be raised in the church in the same way that she had promised God. Now, as that continued, allowing Samuel to be brought up in the priesthood, she did visit him about once a year and bring him a robe. The text does say that, but only got to see her son maybe once a year. All right, next slide, please. As we go into 1 Samuel chapter 2, it starts talking about the fall of Eli and his family, because this is the tale of two priests. The first head priest and a second head priest that's going to be raised up. Now, throughout the Bible, when we see this theme of the second, we see that in some way there is a failure of the first. And this is where that comes in. You see, there are 2 sons that Eli has. They were also brought up in the church, in the temple as well, but they kind of took advantage of their position. They were selfish. They were thieving. They were lustful. They were dishonorable. They were taking the position that they were granted as the sons of the head priest, the sons of the chief priest, to their own benefit. They were selfish. Whenever somebody was coming to the temple to actually provide a sacrifice, because they needed to provide sacrifices for their sins at that point, what they were supposed to do was actually boil the meat that was brought for the sacrifice, and the priest would take a 3-pronged fork and stick it into the bowl, and whatever that fork brought out, that was what the priest got to keep. What these guys would do is they would take a look at the meat before it was even cooked and said, "I want that piece." And then they would take it as their own. If someone said, "Wait a minute, that's not right. You're only supposed to take what's left after it was cooked," they would have their servant go and take it by force, stealing from the people who were going to the temple for a sacrifice. Now, we hear about corruption in the church today. It's nothing new. There was corruption way back then. They also used their position to kind of have their way with the women who work near the temple. Because if you took someone in that position, and you have to think of the chief priests today, very similar to a politician. Because it was their job to basically run the country. In Israel at that time, they had no king, they had no leader. The leader was the chief priest because they considered God their king. So whatever the chief priests would say, it would be the same thing as coming from God himself. So if you had someone saying, I have a word from God for you, you need to spend the night with me, they wouldn't have much of a choice but to do it. Now Eli did hear about this. And this is moving into the sins of Eli. Because Eli did hear about this. He did rebuke his sons a little bit over it, saying that, you know what, you really shouldn't be doing this. It's kind of hurting our reputation. But later on throughout the story, it talks about Eli being heavy. Which kind of gives me the idea that even though Eli was telling them, hey, you shouldn't be stealing this food from people. You shouldn't be taking more than your share, and you shouldn't be bedding all of those women. It sounds to me like he may have been telling them something with his words, but he may have been still partaking in the extra portions that his sons were taking. As it continues, we find Eli actually getting word from God. And God telling him directly, look, because you have sinned against me, you have heard of the things that your sons have been doing, and yet you honor them above me. So he was taking what his sons were doing and treating them with more respect and more reverence than he did for God. And God turned around and told him, look, because you and your family are doing these things, I'm going to remove your family from the priesthood. You're going to know this because both of your sons are going to die in the same day. And from that point on, no one in your family will live to an old age, and they will no longer be allowed to be part of the priesthood. It's pretty harsh. All the while, Samuel was still putting on these new robes that his mother would bring him and learning more and more about God. Several years later, as we were moving into Samuel's life, we find out that, next slide please. We find out that Samuel hears from God personally. Now this is something that really, really strikes me, because have any of you ever heard God speak audibly to you? No? We may have. Some of us may have. Some of us may not have. Some of us may have heard from God and not realized it, as it is kind of demonstrated in this. Because when Samuel hears from God, at this point Eli, who is kind of his surrogate father, is losing his sight. He's having a hard time getting around, so it's Samuel's job to kind of lead him where he needs to go. In the middle of the night when they were all laying down, Samuel hears someone call out to him, Samuel, Samuel. It was God calling him. But Samuel, not knowing that, stood up and he ran to Eli. Said, yeah, I'm here. What do you need? Eli said, I didn't call you. Go back to bed. Which is kind of funny. If any of you who are parents ever had a child run to you in the middle of the night, and you tell them to go back to bed and they come back like 10 minutes later. Yeah, that's kind of par for the course for a parent when your kids are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. You know, they get scared in the middle of the night, they run to you, you send them back to bed, and they come back and say, I'm scared. So this is a little bit different, because at this point, Eli's growing up. He's very likely a young adult at this point. So this is like a teenager running and waking you up in the middle of the night saying, hey, what do you need? Nothing, go back to bed. 10 minutes later they come back, hey Dad, what do you need? Eli gets a little bit frustrated with this and says, you know what? I have not talked to you. I have not called you. Go back to bed and lay down. Samuel thinks Eli is messing with him. And then he hears the voice a third time. Samuel comes back and says, look, I heard you call me. At this point, Eli realizes what's happening, and he says, you know what? It's not me calling you. It's probably God. So the next time you hear that voice, say, you know what? Your servant is here. What do you need? In which case, when Samuel does that, God tells Samuel the same thing that he just told Eli, that he is looking to raise up a priest of his own, that Eli's house is no longer going to be allowed to be part of the priesthood. And when he tells Eli this in the morning, they realize that it really was the voice of God that was speaking to him, that God was raising up Samuel to be his next head priest. All right, next slide, please. All right, now we're moving into the next couple of chapters where God likes to display his power. God needs to make good on the promises that he made, correct? And he made a promise to Eli as to what was going to happen. So the very first thing that happens is there is a great battle going between the Philistines and Israel at this point. And Israel is defeated. And they say, you know what? We were only defeated because we didn't have the Ark of the Covenant here with us. If God was here with us with that Ark, there's no way they would have defeated us. So they went and get the Ark of the Covenant and march out onto the field of battle. The Philistines are a little scared at first, but they regroup and they end up defeating Israel again. And they take the Ark of the Covenant. So now the seat of God is actually being taken to a foreign land. When a runner comes back to Israel and tells Eli, who is basically the leader of the country at this point, and tells him, both of your sons have been killed in battle, and the Philistines took the Ark of the Covenant. This is where it talks about how heavy Eli was. He was so heavy that when he fell off of his chair at that point, he broke his neck. Pretty heavy guy to be able to do that. I've thrown people on their head. It takes a little bit to hurt them. At that point, that is when Samuel begins to ascend to being the head priest of Israel. Now, God doesn't stop there with displaying his power, because do you think he likes people who don't believe in him to have his seat here on earth? An artifact of his power? No, probably not. But as they decide to take this prize, the Ark of the Covenant, they take it to something called the Temple of Dagon, which is a Philistine god. And they sit him right next to Dagon in their temple, and they say, hey, look what we got, let's celebrate, and then they leave for the night. When they come back the next morning, the statue of Dagon was laying face down in front of the Ark of the Covenant, because God said, bow down to your true God. Philistines didn't think much of it, so hey, you know what, that's weird, let's set him back up. And then God said, I said bow! The very next day when they came in, Dagon was again laying face down in front of the Ark of the Covenant with both of the head and arms broken off of it, laying on the threshold of the temples. Now, if you talk to Philistines today, or anyone who still believes in their gods and the things that they believe in, you find the ones that actually still go to things like the Temple of Dagon, they have a system where no matter what you do when you enter that temple, you do not step on the threshold, because that is where the head and hands of Dagon lay after God ended up sundering that statue. They may not agree to what had happened at that point, but they still will not step on that threshold. Just an interesting little tidbit there. So after that happened, God said, you know what, they need something a little extra. So he inflicted all of them with everyone in that town of Ashdod with a plague of tumors and a plague of rats. So people just started sprouting tumors and there were rats everywhere. People at that point realized, you know what? Maybe this thing that we brought into our city isn't the best thing to have in our city. So let's send it to another one. So they sent it to Ashkelon, where people, again, broke out in plagues of tumors and rats. And they said, well, we don't want it. Let's send it over to Gaza. And then the people of Gaza broke out in tumors and rats. Then they sent it to Gath, and it happened again. And then they sent it to Ekron, and it happened again. At that point, Philistines, being a little bit slow at the time, decided, you know what, maybe we shouldn't have this at all. So they decided to send it back to the Israelites. And a place called Beth Shemesh. Thank you. And those people celebrated. We got the Ark of the Covenant back. Woohoo! So they decided to break up the cart that it came in and make an altar out of it. And they decided to, instead of waiting for a priest, let's start making our sacrifices to this now. And you know what? This is an awesome thing. You know what? Moses had this, and they have his staff in there, or staff of Aaron and the Ten Commandments, that stuff's in there. Let's take a look at what's inside. So they were dishonoring and disrespecting the Ark of the Covenant, and because of that, 70 of them died. So it wasn't just the Philistines. When people of God disrespect God, he punishes the people who disrespect him. Interesting stuff. Although it might be a little bit dark. Next one, please. At this point is when Israel returns to God, because they realize, you know what? If this guy's killing off everyone that disrespects him, maybe we should start respecting him a little. So Samuel steps up and starts getting them to get rid of all of these idols, their Asherah poles, and all of the things that they were worshiping that weren't God. He cleans house. And while Samuel is helping Israel to clean house and gathering everyone around the ark, because it once again came into Israel and it was a place that God could actually start doing some work, because they got the country back to a place of a sense of purity. That's when the Philistines decide to attack again, because we have all of our enemies all in one place. But Samuel makes a sacrifice for the sins of Israel. And he ends up routing the entire Philistine army that came to destroy them with a miraculous sound of thunder. That was so loud that the entire invading army, who had most likely heard thunder at some point, breaks up, turns, and runs. At this point, Samuel is really solidified in the eyes of Israel as their true chief priest, as someone who truly speaks for God. All right, next slide, please. So at that point, Samuel served as the leader of the country of Israel until something happens. And I thought I was going to be able to bring this up next week, but it looks like it's going to be about 2 weeks from now. You'll have to tune in then for the next exciting installment of 1 Samuel, where we move from the story of the two priests into the beginning of the story of 2 kings. Happened throughout this first story that we can start taking some notes on. That when we pray, we need to pray passionately. When we say we are going to do something, we need to have the integrity to step up and do the things that we say we are going to do. Whether or not it will be inconvenient, whether or not it will be hard, whether it might come at personal sacrifice, we still need to do the things that we said we are going to do. If people are going to treat us like we are the people of God, then we need to be the people of God. And then we need to treat those things that are holy with a reverence and respect. that is truly lacking in a lot of places in our society today. If we disrespect those in power, if we disrespect those things that represent our power, whether it be things of the church, whether it be our Bible, whether it be the church itself, whether it be the flag of our country, we need to treat the things that hold power over us with reverence and respect, or God may end up putting things in our life that we aren't too happy about. So as we go forward this week, I ask you to try to pray with a passion. Find something that makes you want to cry and pray about it. Tell God exactly what you're feeling. Tell God exactly what you are feeling, what you are thinking, what your goals, what your dreams are. Tell Him what is going on in your life. Find something that you may have been disrespecting and clear your conscience of that. Confess those things to God. And start treating the things of power in our society, in our churches, and in our families with the respect that they deserve. All right, with that, I ask to bow our heads in prayer. Dear Father God, I come to you today, we all come before you today, to learn more about what you would have us know. To dip into your word. To learn about the mistakes of the past and about the ones in the past who have done things that you have praised. I ask you to place on each of our hearts the actions and the thoughts that would deserve your praise. Throughout the week, I ask your blessings and your protection on everyone here. I pray that you bring us all back again next week, so that way we can learn to become more like you. I pray these things in Jesus' name.